All right. So again, good morning, everyone, to our participants and to our invited resource speakers. Welcome to the ninth session of the Environmental Law Teachers Online Training Program developed by the Legal Education Board in partnership with the Asian Development Bank, International Union for Conservation of Nature, Academy of Environmental Law, and the UN Environment Program. I am Attorney Maria Romina Gumal, Program Coordinator of the Legal Education Board, and I will be your host today. So today's topic is about how to design an environmental law clinic and the sharing of experiences and challenges in its our operation. Before we get started, for a brief recap of our last session, we engaged in a panel discussion on climate change law with resource speakers DNR Yusek Analisa Te, Attorney Antonio Lavinia, Commissioner Rachel Ann Herrera. Our resource speakers tackles key climate change issues and latest pronouncement of the Supreme Court involving environmental issues. Now for the House rules. And before that, we remind everyone to fill up the registration form and the evaluation form for your attendance. Kindly check the links in our chat box. And we would like also to inform everyone that for those who wish to join us for an interview, the link for the interview form is also posted in our chat box. The form and we can schedule an interview with you. So now for our house rules. So please let us know if we could record this session today. We will only start recording if all parties consent to the recording. Kindly mute your microphone while waiting for others to join in and when not speaking during the session. Use also our chat box option if you have any questions or comments to our resource speaker. Interaction options to interact with our speakers and guests, and turn off your video camera during the session to lessen the amount of bandwidth for everyone in the meeting. We will be taking our group picture later before we end today's session. We will also have an open forum with our resource speakers, and we encourage everyone to share us their thoughts, comments, or questions on today's lecture through our chat box. You may also raise your hand later to speak by clicking the raise hand button. Okay, so let us now begin the session with the introduction of our first invited resource speaker. So our first resource speaker for today is Dr. Georgina Lloyd. She is the Regional Coordinator of the Asia and the Pacific of Environmental Law and Governments for the United Nations Environment Program, or UNEP. She joined the UNEP Regional Office after spending 12 years based in Siem Reap, Cambodia. And during her time in Southeast Asia, she has conducted research on environmental law and policy, heritage law, tourism management, and the development of good environmental governance. Dr. Georgina has been involved in capacity building for environmental law within Southeast Asia and has provided advice to government and non-government stakeholders on environmental law and policy issues. In recent years, Georgina has been the director of the SFS Center for Conservation and Development Studies in Cambodia, where her work focused on community-based natural resource management, protected areas management, climate change, traditional practice, and environmental governance. Georgina holds a PhD in law, master's in environmental law, and bachelor's in environmental science from the University of Sydney. So, ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome again our resource speaker, Dr. Georgina Lloyd.
Thank you very much, Mary, and I'm very happy to join again this morning.
Good morning to you.
Important program. Thank you. So, Angelo, can I please share on my side, please? Thank you. Yeah, I'm just going to share my slides. Okay, so as Mary was saying, today's session is really going to focus on environmental law clinics and the benefits that environmental law clinics can provide to the teaching of environmental law. And we spoke in previous sessions about experiential learning techniques and how to integrate this into really significant component into teaching environmental law, because in order for students to really have that passion for environmental law and understand the issues, they need to get out of the classroom. They need to get into the communities. They need to get into nature, and they need to understand not only the legal aspects of environmental issues, but also the science behind them, and they understand those environmental impact components of these sorts of issues. And environmental law clinics are a way for...
in your mailbox.
Sorry, there's someone that isn't muted. Environmental law clinics are really an important way for students to get that experience. So clinical education can be sort of a defined internship experience, but it can also be a standalone experience where students practice didactic and experiential skills under the supervision of an experienced and a qualified legal practitioner. Clinical legal education has known benefits for law students in providing this practical experience and the understanding of real-world legal issues and the application of law in these cases. Importantly, students learn to analyze the complex legal issues, because many environmental concerns that we explore are very complex, have a lot of different stakeholders involved. There's often a lot of scientific evidence and understanding that needs to be incorporated. Clinical legal education is also a teaching method where, of course, students are confronting real problems, interacting with real people, performing as real lawyers. And so this really enables them to perform in these real world situations. And of course, learning from experience and learning from the supervision of those experienced lawyers that they're working with. So they're basically translating the theory, the law from the books, into reality. Often you can have a separate credit bearing course that is tied to a related theoretical course. Or these can actually be independent, but the most effective ways that students can engage with law clinics is through an accredited course. In the Asia Pacific region, UNEP specifically recognizes that law clinics provide a very valuable contribution to environmental rule of law, particularly through supporting Principle 10 rights, Rio Principle 10 on access to information, access to justice, access to remedy. And of course, supporting public participation and participation in decision-making processes. Legal clinics in many law schools offer free legal services to vulnerable and marginalized groups. And as a result, many of these individuals and communities access services to protect their rights or claim benefits where they otherwise perhaps would not have access or claim. So through providing legal support and legal services to these groups that often face disproportionate impacts, law students and law schools are playing a direct role in advancing social justice and environmental justice. In addition to this really critical role in advancing environmental and social justice, clinics can also support legal research, the development of legal handbooks, raising awareness of core legal issues, and supporting policy development. They can provide a commentary on broader legal issues and also raise the profile of emerging or priority legal issues. They can give a sense of validity and provide backstopping to community organizations that are trying to raise awareness of environmental injustice. Of course, they can also provide direct legal services to address environmental problems where that is allowed in the local national legal context. So if we look more specifically at Asia Pacific, it's seen that specialized law clinics are really vital in the environmental field because, and I've mentioned this earlier in this course, knowledge of environmental law and indeed the environmental and earth sciences, which are vital for sufficient understanding of the facts of the case, often are not sufficient amongst the broader legal profession or that well represented in law firms. So environmental law clinics in universities can draw upon the broader expertise of also the university faculty, working closely, say, with the science faculties, geography, and others. they're also vital as there's often inadequate access to environmental lawyers. And of course, that is something that this program is directly addressing by providing this training and integrating environmental law as a compulsory component of legal curriculums. We're generating this groundswell of environmental lawyers, but still, there's never enough environmental lawyers in the world. In fact, all lawyers should be environmental lawyers. But we need to have these services, these environmental legal clinics, to provide that access to communities so that they can exercise their legal rights. So law clinics play a really vital role in providing these legal services and advancing social and environmental justice, enabling communities to realize their rights to, in the Philippine context, a balanced and healthful ecology. But in the global context now, with the Recognized Human Rights Council resolution, to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. Of course, I've mentioned this, but this is particularly important because vulnerable communities often are disproportionately impacted by environmental harm, and often don't have opportunities to contribute to decision-making processes and law-making processes. So environmental legal clinics make it possible for victims of environmental harm to afford high quality legal services to protect their rights and to protect the environment. But in Asia, specialized environmental legal clinics are generally not well established. The Philippines actually is probably one of the countries in the region that has one of the most active movements in environmental protection and has components of law schools that is seeking to provide community services. I mean, UP Diliman and University of Cebu do a lot to support environmental advocacy and providing pro bono legal support, but there's not as yet institutionalized environmental law clinics to my understanding. And so there needs to be further work done across the region, including in Philippines, to have more environmental law clinics established within universities. So understanding all of these advantages, UNEP first supported the development of an environmental law clinic in China. In 2015, China amended its environmental protection laws to allow any duly registered NGO that has been engaged in environmental protection activities for at least 5 consecutive years to initiate public interest environmental litigation. So in March 2018, the Wuhan University Environmental Law Clinic was created as the first environmental legal clinic of its kind in China, and focused on training and supporting law students and other stakeholders in both the practice and the theory of public interest environmental litigation. And UNEP's work in this area sort of fits under our broader environmental rights initiative, which seeks to promote and respect communities' rights to a safe, clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, and support those who advocate for those rights. So UNEP is very keen to continue to support the establishment of community environmental law clinics across Asia and the Pacific, and would be very happy to partner with any universities that are undertaking this. We, of course, work with many other partners in this undertaking. So we have in the past worked with Vermont Law School, as well as ADB and other partners. And I'll explain some of the partnerships that we're currently developing in a second. So law clinics can enable students to research and provide legal support to address really core environmental issues that, of course, include air pollution, mining, illegal fishing, which is of course quite significant in the Philippines, and infrastructure development, amongst a myriad of other issues. And I think one of the really interesting things, and this came up in the last session that I participated in, where we were talking about the broader experiential learning, is that providing these experiences for law students can really build social and environmental consciousness among students. And that is so critical. I mean, it's fundamental that lawyers have that, that integral social conscience and environmental conscience. But I think equally, actually practicing environmental law brings home the significance of what we do in this field. Like, we are really addressing these existential threats to the planet. And the work that we're doing is up against a lot of, big challenges in terms of development, push for extraction, push to use more resources. And this is even more the case now with COVID, where many countries are now looking at their COVID recovery strategies that are really founded on increasing resource extraction, and rolling back environmental safeguards, not reinforcing these safeguards, which is what is needed in order for us to address the pollution crisis, the climate crisis, and the biodiversity crisis. So understanding, giving students the opportunity to really delve into these issues often brings home the significance of the work of environmental law. So looking at the key components, if you were to establish an environmental law clinic, these six different criteria to consider. And I want to acknowledge that this comes from a paper that was developed by two Thai colleagues, Songkrant and Nuttaman, who Songkrant is currently based at UVic doing his PhD, and Nuttaman is the Dean of the Law School of Chiang Mai University. And we're exploring with them the establishment of a law clinic. And so we've done this baseline analysis, which is really useful for anyone who's exploring establishing a law clinic, because it's sort of looking at these, what are the key components that need to be considered. So the first is the objectives and structure. Of course, most law clinics are located within universities and often connected to a law school, but you can have an independent center that may be under the school administration, but may also be administered through a private sector partner or an NGO partner or someone else. So you have to consider what are the core objectives of your law clinic and how are you going to structure it. Second is, what are the links to law school curriculums? And I touched upon this a little bit earlier, but often having a law clinic embedded within a law school curriculum is the most effective model. But there are many competing things on students' time. And using the Thai example, a law school curriculum over 4 years has 135 to 145 credits, and students often have their plates full. And more often than not, a legal clinic course is an elective course, and students may not have the time to devote to these activities. So by providing credit and perhaps even other benefits that students can get that would support their achievement of their degree, can really be a booster for the environmental law clinic. Then you need to look at the role of professors and staff, because not only do students have a lot on their plates, but so do professors. And of course, when you look at all of the key performance indicators that professors are now given, having to publish X amount, having to raise X amount of funding for the university, having to teach so many hours, publish your own papers, all of those sorts of things, professors often don't have the time to take on additional tasks. And it's not sustainable to expect professors to supervise law clinics in an unpaid, voluntary basis. In order for a clinic to be sustainable, you do need to have paid staff, including paid administrative staff. So you need to consider what expectations there are on law professors and how they will be remunerated for their support. The next one is the scope of the legal services, and different environmental law clinics take different approaches to this. They can be consultative clinics, research clinics, providing information to the community and raising awareness. They can also collect data and monitor, and looking at, for example, issues of compliance with various pieces of legislation. They can also work on law reform and support drafting processes, as well as then undertaking litigation. And we're going to look at a couple of examples that Naka and Songkran explored when looking at the appropriate model for Thailand. The next one is networking and partnerships. And this is actually really critical because having strong partnerships with NGOs and even private sector law clinics can really enable a law clinic to be sustainable because of all of these competing constraints on professors' time. If you can partner with lawyers in law firms, then they can not only provide, I mean, they get paid enough, they can provide more pro bono support, but also they can provide an extra layer of real world experience to the students. And then, of course, you need to partner with scientists. Partnering with governments can be very, very effective, especially if your law clinic is going to be one that looks at law reform, research and awareness raising. Building up trust relationships with governments is really useful. And finally, funding. Environmental law clinics are expensive, can be quite expensive. And you need to, in order to provide those high quality legal services, you need to have experienced staff on board. So you need to look at funding models, and it's not sustainable to expect a university to cover all of those costs or even grants from government. And so many law clinics actually partner with legal firms and get some support from legal firms as well as other international organizations. So then if we look at three possible models on this, the first model is one from the University of Victoria, Canada. And this is the first and the largest environmental law legal clinic in Canada. It's actually established as a non-profit society and has cooperated with the Faculty of Law to teach public interest environmental law courses, as well as to provide legal services to communities. Most of the work of the University of Victoria Environmental Law Clinic can be classified as law reform work, but they also conduct research to support advocacy for a better environment, as well as drafting petitions to obtain environmental information. So it follows more of a law reform model. It does offer an accredited course, which is an elective course under a law degree. They cover public interest environmental cases. And this law clinic actually has a legal status that is separated from the university. It's quite well established. It has its own institutional structure and separate legal status. And most of the funding does come from external funding sources. The second clinic is the Georgetown University Clinic. And this was established in 1991. And its goal is to improve marginalized communities' public health and environmental conditions in the District of Columbia. Most of its educational goals is to provide hands-on legal training to students, including lawyering skills, analysis skills, strategic thinking, and decision-making. It is not a standalone clinic, but it is located in an existing clinic, which is the Institute for Public Representation, established by the Georgetown University Law Center in 1971. It uses more of a litigation model, and this is because of the uniqueness of the United States, and a litigation model is more common in the United States because court rules allow for students to represent clients in courts or administrative tribunals under the supervision of lawyers. And so students are able to undertake legal advice, as well as law reform proposals and legal representation in courts. This is an accredited course. And it's part of the law school, and its funding is partly funded by the law school and partly funded by external funding. The last one is the Wuhan Environmental Law Clinic, which was established in 2018, as I mentioned. This follows more a consulting model. So the clinic does serve public interest cases. It conducts workshops to promote environmental rule of law and policy initiatives. They work with partners to address issues in public interest litigation cases. It's an accredited course, it's elective, It's structured under a research institution, and it is dependent on external funding. So those are just three different models, and finding the best for your law school will depend on local conditions. I also just wanted to put a quick plug here, because most of these law schools, of course, are supporting public interest environmental litigation. And this is some of the work that we're doing also across the region to provide the enabling legal environment to actually allow public interest litigation in Southeast Asia. In the Philippines, actually, there are public interest environmental cases, but in other countries in Southeast Asia, they don't take place. So we actually are running this workshop later this week, and if anyone is interested to join, please do so. We would very much welcome your participation. I also wanted to share another recent development. Vermont Law School is providing what they're calling a practicum, an environmental law practicum in Southeast Asia, or in Asia rather, not just Southeast Asia. But they're looking at ways in which virtually students at Vermont Law School will provide practical legal support to either NGOs or other partners in Asia. So we'll share the link for that as well, because I think that's another very interesting approach. So finally, looking at UNEP support for Chiang Mai University. So CMU is looking to establish an environmental legal clinic, the first in Thailand. And they're looking at doing this as a consulting and law reform model. They want it to be an accredited course, focusing on public interest environmental cases under the law school, but they're looking at a mixed funding model, including external funding, as well as depending on some university funding as well. So finally, let me just finish up. I know the time is almost done, on some of the challenges, and I would be really welcome opportunities to discuss these with everyone. One of the challenges in terms of student engagement is the life cycle of a legal case versus, of course, a university semester or even a degree. So you need to ensure that there is appropriate support for a case across a longer time frame. And you need to be able to transition between different students who are supporting that case. You need to have supervising capacity. And as I said, trying to source this from law firms and external stakeholders, as well as from within the university. You need to think about how you're going to select your cases that you're going to explore, or your environmental issues that you're going to take up. Funding is a big one. Funding sustainability, how to address that. And finally, something that has not really been explored so far in all of the existing environmental law clinics that tend to be set up in the US and Canada, is issues of safety and risks around sensitive issues, particularly where environmental lawyers, often in Southeast Asia, are themselves environmental human rights defenders. And there are significant risks posed to environmental human rights defenders, particularly in the Philippines, which unfortunately has the unfortunate label of being the country where the most environmental defenders are killed in our part of the world. So that's something that we need to carefully consider, and why building trust relationships with external stakeholders, particularly government and others, is really critical, I think, in our region. So I'm going to finish there, and I would really welcome some discussion around these points. Thank you.
All right, to our participants, if you have any questions, you may use the chat box to send us your comments or questions on Dr. Georgina's lecture. Matthew will also be assisting during the this short Q&A portion.
And you can also use your, there's a question there, Georgie, from Professor Galahad. You can also use the reaction button to raise your hand if you want to make any comment.
Can I respond to Galahad? So I'd love to know which university you are with. I'm sorry, I don't recall. But UNEP can support by bringing the technical support, technical expertise, by providing possibly a consultant, or providing advice around the establishment and structuring of the law clinic. I can't promise that we can provide direct funding to a law clinic, but we can support in setting up the institutional frameworks, all of the MOUs or the structures and the technical information that is needed. Also just providing access to other colleagues at these other law clinics that have been established for a number of years. So providing connections to UVic or to Vermont Law School or to Georgetown, those sorts of things, building up those relationships. Another thing that we would like to explore actually, and we don't currently have this in the pipeline, but I'd love to do it, is actually having a forum across the region where we bring representatives from different law schools to explore and exchange information about the establishment of law clinics in different universities. So bringing in experts from China, bringing in, from Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, Philippines, and really exploring, as well as South Asia, where they're doing a lot in this area as well, in India and Pakistan. I would also, we have discussed this with ADB, would love to do like an ASEAN environmental law clinic, where over a summer, possibly students could be selected from different ASEAN countries, and it could rotate. So it could be hosted by a law clinic, or a law unit in a university in the Philippines, and then it could go to the law school in Thailand for one summer, and then go to the law school at another university in another country for another summer. And so each summer, possibly different students, would get the opportunity to explore issues not only in their own country, but within the region. These are all really exciting things that I think we could discuss more deeply. I like Matthew's suggestion, do a survey to see what interest there is.
Professor Galahad, did you?
Yes, good morning, Georgina, and thank you. How can we possibly contact you or communicate with you?
Sorry, I was muted. I'll put my email in the chat box and you can send me an email directly.
Thank you so much.
And I think just following up, because this was also a topic raised at the ADB trainers workshop in Cebu now, I think 3 years ago now, about this idea of networking. And I guess one of my sort of questions to you, Georgie, is that a lot of the clinics certainly in America do seem to have a bit more of a network going, whereas here, clinical legal education doesn't, there's some around, but it doesn't seem to be networked. So maybe this is also something that we could look at, is sort of a broader survey in terms of some of the needs and expectations and how they could be managed as well.
That's a good idea. Lisa put a really important point in the chat box, that often clinics are defending environmental defenders that are criminalized, and they require appropriate support. And that might be emergency protection support, it might be online digital security support, it might be obviously legal advice and others. So Lisa's asking, can I share info of organizations that provide these support? Yes, we have a website under our Environmental Rights Initiative that is a sort of repository of information that is, and resources and organizations that support defenders and can provide sort of that emergency initial support. We are also working at the moment with Universal Rights Group to develop a list of resources. And once that list is finished, we can share that with everyone. The other key connection, I think, is really vital for if you are establishing a law clinic and you are providing these services, to connect also with the National Human Rights Institution, because the NHRI can provide support to defenders, as well as they do a lot of important monitoring work. And so even if you just in touch with them to inform them of different cases, that's really critical so that they can appropriately monitor and provide that sort of independent oversight for many of these critical cases. So I'll put that website in the boxes, in the chat box as well.
Thanks, Georgie, for providing the information. Yeah, we often, I think increasingly right now, we've seen an increase in cases. That's why environmental legal clinics are very important, because in EHRDs are now criminalized, like slap cases are filed against them, and often these are criminal cases. Just recently, we had to provide emergency support for one EHRD who was arrested, so we had to raise the bail money for them, so that was really and I was thinking, I wish there would be some information where we can also for these kinds of emergency support needs that we can tap easily, because otherwise we have to raise the funds ourselves. And so you're not only providing legal services but also trying to help EHRDs, in their provide them this emergency support needs. So
yeah, really critical. I understand in the Philippines, the NHRI are planning to set up but I don't think it has been established yet, but they were talking about setting up a immediate protection assistance fund. Also, I shared the link there for APNED, which is the Asia Pacific Network of Environmental Defenders. And they're actually based in the Philippines. The secretariat is based in the Philippines. And they can be a good resource to reach out to, because they would have access to other organizations that can help. And UNEP does support the work of APNED, and we will be continuing to support them in 2022. And one of the things is to provide advisory services to defenders that are at risk of having environmental violations. So those are some. The other one is Frontline Defenders is a really important organization, as well as Forum Asia. But links to those organizations can be also found through the environmentalrights.org website that I put in the chat.
All right, so I guess we no longer have any questions from our participants. We will now move on to the awarding of the Certificate of Appreciation. Okay, so the Legal Education Board awards the Certificate of Appreciation to Dr. Georgina Lloyd, UN Environment Program Regional Coordinator of the Environmental Law and Governance Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific, for sharing her time, knowledge, and expertise as resource speaker during the Environmental Law Teachers Online Training Program 9th session, How to Design an Environmental Law Clinic, Experiences and Challenges, held via Zoom virtual conference and given this 24th day of November in the year of our Lord 2021 in Manila. Signed by the chairperson of the Legal Education Board, Chair Ana Marie Melanie B. Trinidad. So thank you very much, Dr. Georgina, for sharing your insights on the operation of the different models of ELC in Asia. So I guess our participants can truly relate, and you share the links. So to our participants, you can access the information and the link shared by Dr. Georgina in our chat box. Okay, so we will now move on to the second resource speaker for today's session. She will now share her experience and the challenges on operationalizing an environmental law clinic here in the Philippines. So our second research speaker is a graduate of the University of the Philippines College of Law in the year 1981, and she also passed the bar in 1982. She received her Master's of Law degrees in the Dalhousie University in Canada in 1993, where she studied Natural Resources Administration, Comparative Environmental Law, and Indigenous Peoples. She graduated from the UP College of Arts and Sciences in Diliman in 1977 with the course of AB Philosophy, and she was a cum laude during the graduation. She completed the summer orientation course on environmental studies at the University of the Philippines, Los Baños School of Environmental Science and Management. Our second resource speaker has been teaching natural resources and environmental law since 2011 in various law schools, including the UP College of Law, the La Salle de Pa College of Law, the De La Salle University College of Law, and the Centro Escolar University School of Law and Jurisprudence. She also lectures on environmental law and policy at the UP Law Center Paralegal Training Program and the UP IAJ MCLE program. In 1987, she worked in the Special Concerns Office under Secretary Fulgencio Facturan of the Department of Environmental and Natural Resources to set up and initially handle the Indigenous Community Affairs Division. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome again Attorney Donna Gasconia.
Thank you, Maria. I'd like to share my screen. I sent to you the wrong file, so
Okay,
but I'll send you the correct file eventually because I realized I had 20 minutes, so that was quite short. So let me begin. I am now going to share the experiences that we had and continue to experience at the UP College of Law Clinical Legal Education Program, where I handle the environmental litigation clinic, and also in La Salle Pa College of Law, Practice Court 1 and 2. Education is based on Rule 138A of the Supreme Court, and it already tells us what the learning outcomes are for the clinical legal education program. It's to make sure that our students get knowledge, get skills, values, before they even become lawyers, so that when they do become lawyers, these are already imbibed in them. The objective is to promote social justice, public interest, help the marginalized sector. We should tell them about ethical lawyering and, of course, public service. There are two modes. One is a law clinic in school, which is what we have in UP and La Salle. There's also externship or off-campus. We all have that in UP. So how does this go? Well, for our in-school law clinic, specifically for environmental litigation. But those of you who were involved in the Office of Legal Aid of UP, which was 30 years ago, has already been in place. This just became more focused on environment. So I was already I already experienced legal aid, Office of Legal Aid. So that was quite a long time. You can see my white hair. Okay, so what do? We try to bring our students, law interns, we call them law interns, and this was possible before the pandemic. We can either be observers, or I can be, as a lawyer, practicing lawyer, be a special prosecutor for environmental law. And there are just requirements, which is basically the approval of the judge, the prosecutor, and the DOJ prosecutor. Sometimes there's a special DOJ prosecutor, not the court prosecutor for environmental law. We also provide research assistance to the prosecutor in charge, because they don't have as much time to do research except the DOJ special prosecutors. They have their own research team, but they do welcome assistance from us. Now, what do we, the important thing is representation and support. So we have to make sure that our clients are the real parties in interest. Those who go to us for requests for our assistance, the first thing we assess is, do they really represent the people that they are affected by the environmental damage? And then we identify if they are qualified witnesses. So we do consultations. We also conducted on-site consultations before the pandemic. Medyo limited ngayon because of the pandemic. Here's a photograph of UP. This is our Office of Legal Aid, which I use also for the environmental litigation clinic. And you can see my students there. We are reviewing petitions that we have filed actually regarding land grabbing of ancestral domains. And the threat of destruction of about 26-year-old trees that were planted by the ITAS in Pinatubo, now threatened by patent holder, land grabbers. So we have to make sure first that there is a cause of action. So that's when you draft and submit pleadings, the students are required to find the cause of action. So in environmental law, there has to be environmental damage. And so there, the environmental damage is the threatened cutting of the trees that were actually planted with the help of DENR's National Greening Program. But so they have to be the trees are, and we have to find the laws that apply to them. We have to have make sure that there's a link to our clients. The ITAs were the ones who planted the trees with the DNR. They took care of the trees all these years, and it's within their ancestral domain. And then so we now determine, do we pursue a civil or criminal case? Then we determine jurisdiction. There's a problem of forum shopping if we file so many cases. But in environmental law, because we have so many special laws, a single incident can be filed in different as different offenses. So there's that leeway for environmental law. Okay. And then we incorporated, which is very much important, the client interviews and consultations. We used to have, well, we still have now face-to-face, naka-mask lang kami. But previously, walang mask. And we find better venues to talk to them. As you can see, I have my students, the pre-pandemic one, where they're all not wearing masks. And then the pandemic, where they're now wearing masks. So it's important because it's a reality check. Your law then inspired because they see the real people affected. They know who the real marginalized sectors are. At the same time, our clients who are marginalized sector find some hope that there is a chance in the legal system. We are able to explain, and when law interns interview our clients, they realize that it's not just one environmental law. It's not isolated. So many environmental laws come into play, criminal laws come into play, civil law, special laws come into play. So they also have to know not just substantive law, but the rules of procedure, especially evidence forms that have to be verified. Otherwise, they are thrown as useless pieces of paper, and fees. So these are the realities that we confront, that law interns confront in a legal clinic. So what are challenges? The first challenge really is we want to win the case of our clients. And our clients are marginalized sectors. So you can see, I tried to put them. Only one is really capable of writing, documenting. The rest just listen, and so we record our meetings with them. And we also ensure the safety of our clients. They have to go down from the mountains or from the coastal areas to meet us, because where there's basically two types of clients now for environmental law. The indigenous peoples from the mountains and the fisher folk from the coastal communities, including those in the West Philippine Sea, affected by the West Philippine Sea problem. Okay, so these are the challenges. We want to win the case. Therefore, when we talk to the clients, we have to analyze, will we win the case for them? If not, we tell them outright. We don't want to give false hopes. They are already in a situation where it is so sensitive that if you give them false hope and you lose the case, that is really devastating. So we don't want to make that mistake of giving false hopes and then lose the case. Sometimes within a month, within 3 months of filing the case, that's devastating for this kind of clients. Marginalized sector na sila eh. So we can't afford that. So what are the bigger challenges really is to make sure that we know what environmental law is. So this is the list in the environmental law procedure, the rules for environmental law. So ito lang talaga yung nakalagay doon. Oh. So forestry code, marine pollution, toxic substances, people small-scale mining, mining large-scale quarry, protected areas, indigenous peoples, fisheries, Clean Air Act, solid waste caves, wildlife chains of clean water. We are now reading and studying public lands because public lands actually, especially land grabbing, is happening everywhere. And then we have to learn about UNCLOS because one of our clients are affected by that, by the West Philippine Sea problem. So what are witnesses? Because we go to court. The witnesses, we prefer really are government officials. In this case, we were able to join the DOJ case against the broker who imported the Canada trash. And so we met this guy. He's from EMB. He's a chemical engineer, specialist on toxic plastic wastes. And it was very important, and the students learned that you can't just say, oh, this is toxic waste. He had enough expertise, background, qualification. He was presented in court, and so that's a very conclusive proof on the part of the DOJ. We were just observers there. On the other hand, you can see the NBI special agent who did a buy-bust operation in Binondo of these dried seahorses sold in a pharmacy, a Chinese pharmacy. That was a challenge case that we tried to help. We did help actually the public prosecutor, the court prosecutor there, because the cost to the event of that was a problem. And then these are our clients. So I put a photograph of our clients so that it gives you the idea that if you do set up an environmental litigation clinic, prioritize the marginalized sectors. They're the ones who really need legal assistance. And your school will have the institutional capacity to help them, really help them. The NGOs have their funding. They can exist. Go for the real, the people on the ground. And however, that's the challenge because they will be the witnesses. So they live in remote areas, no cell signal, no internet, and they have daily basic needs. So whenever we get them right now because of the pandemic, they need the RT-PCR, the antigen tests. They have to go through checkpoints and lockdowns. Well, several of our communities were on lockdown for about a month, and we couldn't get in touch with them. So what happens to your witnesses then? Challenges, evidence, again, is important. Accuracy of scientific or technical evidence. If we're dealing with toxic waste or household waste, there has to be waste characterization. If we're talking about rare or common or exempted species, we need to know the specific species. We need scientists, and there's a globo. These are giant clams. We need to know, is this the scientific species that is in the list? Because these are the Taclobo are the favorite illegal cargo of Chinese fishermen. Kinukuha yan ng mga Chinese fishermen, the poachers, like to harvest the Taclobo, and so that's a major issue also. Now there's also land grabbing and fake patents. I tried to put a copy of a fake patent, we realize that it's going. So I can't show you, but you probably know how a patent looks like, so you can tell if the patent is fake or not. But because our clients are marginalized sectors, they have no idea. You can show them an internet hinted patent of somebody else that has been photoshopped or something, and they think it's valid, and then they get afraid. So this is very important. So evidence, we have to get certified true copies of what the other parties have to show the court, or the, well, we're doing administrative, we're doing this with the DNR, lands management tool. So because they're the ones who know that. So we had to get certified true copies. What else? The problem is sometimes you're about to win, but there's plea bargaining. It depends on who is the accused, who are the accused. If the accused are also fishermen, especially doing dynamite or cyanide fishing, which is what I have here, minsan nakakaawa din eh. So the prosecutor, because we're still under the prosecutor, even if we are special prosecutors, naaawa. So bibigyan na lang ng lesser offense, so nakakalabas na sila. But these are the evidences we have to prove in court. So when you have sodium, show that picture there. What you need are samples. So there you have the in jars, the fish that were caught, and then you need, according to the BFAR, the laboratory needs at least, preferably yung Coke bottle, yung 2 litro. The water sample should be that quantity before they can test it and say there is the presence of cyanide or dynamite. The problem is that because cyanide is dissolved in water, so there's the time element. Kung malayo yung laboratory, by the time your water sample gets there, wala nang trace. Nawawala yung trace. So there's the problem of evidence, because we still have, and if not the actual water sample, the lab report, if we are able to get a lab report. Okay. Well, I said there also, the problem also is especially in illegal fishing or dynamite fishing, or basically dynamite fishing and cyanide fishing. And nahuhuli are the fishermen, not the buyers. We cannot go after the buyers, but they're the ones who even the Taclobo fishermen, they're small fishermen, they're small scale. But who do they sell them to? Hindi makuha yun eh. Maybe that's why the NBI is needed to trace that. So again, here's another challenge for us, which is the actual filing of the action and the evidences that have to be attached to the complaint or the petition, whichever form you think is the most appropriate. What I have here is because this is the land grabbing case that we have. So you can see my student there on the left, that photograph. He's the one in charge of the payment of filing fees. It's not that expensive. It's only 60 pesos per petition. So affordable. But the important thing is to accompany our clients, the indigenous peoples, as you can see them in the next picture, so that they are able to have them recorded, properly recorded, given a number, and then they have their copy that it has been received. And then in the bottom photograph, I want to show you my students with our clients. So the clients are holding their copies of the petition, but my students, you can notice, are look like lawyers, diba? Because that's our dress code. Whenever we deal with our clients, especially in filing cases or just talking to them in client interviews, I make sure that they look like lawyers. I don't want them to wear denims, t-shirts, because to me that's degrading our clients. It's like, I'll dress like this because can you, my question really is, if you're talking to a client, will you not dress up? So yes, and therefore, you dress your best. As you can see, my student is wearing a dress, wearing shoe with heels, and then the barong polo shirt of my law interns. And that's so nice because in the area, they think they're lawyers. I mean, if they don't ask you if you're a lawyer, just call you attorney, that's fine. Because you get the prestige of and then our clients are so proud that these are the people who accompany them, not an activista or red tag person. Although we have been red tag, but with that kind of fire, you won't be red tag, not necessarily. Okay. Then we also go to the notary public, have things notarized. It's best to find a friendly notary public who will do it for free. We have found one in the provinces. Unfortunately, where we are in UP, our office is in Taguig, BGC. We have to pay something like 350 pesos per document, discounted at 250. But if you find notary publics, they also do it. So what are the other challenges? It's really the area. So this is our area. These are the trees that will be cut by the land grabbers. It's inside the ancestral domain. So we insist on government surveys because the land grabbers will use private surveys, which are not official anyway, but still are intimidating. We are in the territorial sea and the EEZ area. So my students, they're there on the boat because they had to see for themselves exactly where this area is. And so that's properly documented. And so they realized that the fishermen actually rely on the Coast Guard, the Philippine Navy, the local Philippine Navy, and the PNP Maritime Command. When the PNP Maritime Command started supporting and eventually started apprehending illegal fishermen, they can't go against the Chinese. Only the Navy can do that. When the PNP Maricom tried to started filing cases against the illegal dynamite fishers, the local mayor had them relocated to a far town. So now there's no one watching the area. So I'm saying this because the marginalized sector need government support. They can't do it on them by themselves because they will be harassed. But if you have the government with you, that's the most ideal situation. If the government is against you, there's so many government agencies. Find the one that will support. But we really do this because we want to ensure their safety. Okay, so more challenges. So again, cause of action, real parties in interest, especially indispensable parties. There are lessons learned in case law. So I put 3 so that when we study these cases, let's not romanticize them. Henares versus LTFRB is a mandamus. There's no specific law. So that case was dismissed. Abogado versus DNR. The complainants are local fishermen against Chinese fishermen. But the case became a case against the government. So the other parties, we were in the Supreme Court hearing the justices, and we can actually hear Justice Lonen saying exactly what the complainants should do to remedy the situation because they failed to submit judicial affidavits. So eventually it was a face-saving effort where the complainants, the lawyers, had to withdraw the petition, had to withdraw the request for a writ of kaligtasan because the fishermen executed affidavits in favor of the government that they don't want to be represented. So bad. If you're there, that's so bad. My students and I had to discuss it well that this should never happen to us. That's a lesson learned. Now, how about OPOSA versus Factoran? I know it's unpopular to say this, but at UP, we have to discuss it properly. The case of OPOSA versus Factoran did such a good job of creating public awareness of environmental law. But what is its legal worth if you're going to file litigation? The legal worth is that Attorney Oposa failed to plead any of the TLA holders, and they are indispensable parties. So he did not get any order from the Supreme Court to cancel any TLAs, because you have to implead the TLA holder who is an indispensable party. And that's what we're doing. We make sure when we file cases, we know who the person is, who the indispensable party is, because otherwise that case will be dismissed. Okay. More challenges. A lot of petitions will require documents that have to be notarized, and there will be several copies. So the rules, the implementing rules and regulations of a particular office will say how many copies they need. And sometimes it's 8 copies, sometimes it's 10 copies. You can imagine the cost of copying a thick petition. Fortunately, in UP and in LaSalle, there's copying machines. Except that it takes time. Kasi hindi ganun kabilis yung copying. Actually, lahat ng printer sa UP College of Law, sa BGC, nagamit na namin. Pati yung copier ni Dean. Hindi nga niya copier yun, isa printer. Pero nakuha namin. Otherwise, you will be paying thousands of pesos if you were to copy, to get the copies required to file a complaint, a petition, or a pleading. So that's very important. The next one is our clients are marginalized sectors. Not all of them have government issued IDs. So that is again part of the client interview. Why you need government IDs? Because those are needed for notarization and even in the filing of cases. Some cases or petitions that have to be filed require that are submitted IDs, government IDs, and photographs of the actual petitioners and complainants. So that's very important. Now, what about certified true copies? It depends where you're getting it. The advantage of UP, government to government, so sometimes it's free, sometimes it's discounted. But with LaSalle, full payment. So medyo yun yung disadvantage. Pag LaSalle yung nagre-request, medyo sisingilin talaga. But it depends, it varies. Merong mahal eh, merong 60 pesos, merong 120, may 150. So depende sa office na hihinga na certified true copies. Now I go now to the externship. So meron ding externship ang UP College of Law, Clinical Legal Education Program. Right now, we have a tie-up with the OSG, Office of the Solicitor General. And we're trying to have a tie-up with IBP, Integrated Bar of the Philippines. Kaya lang minsan nababato pa sa UP yung kaso. So, but as we said, in the RTC Manila, where there are 2 environmental courts, we have an informal agreement already where yung mga law interns ko pumupunta na sa prosecutor directly and asking her, ma'am, ano pong kailangan yung legal research? Ano po yung pwede namin isubmit to help you with the memo kung tapos na yung case? So, but of course, you can do that also with Court of Appeals, Supreme Court. I forgot to put DOJ. DOJ has a special task force on environmental cases. And however, hindi namin na-pursue yun kasi nag-pandemic. And then the best really is to find NGOs because they're the ones that will bring you closer to the community. Mahirap din talaga yung community diretso sa law school. Hindi kaya yun eh. The NGOs are there to facilitate that. So really, find the NGOs, work with them, and then help them deliver the services to their beneficiaries. So here's just a list. Makukuha po nyo yung list ng RTCs na designated as environment courts. In Manila, there's 2, Quezon City 1. You can see here, Pasay, Caloocan, Makati. This is just NCR. Before the pandemic, I called all of them because that's what I do for the environmental litigation clinic. I will call the branches and find out if there are any pending cases, environmental cases, and if they're willing for the judge to allow us to work with them. At that time, only Manila had environmental cases. All the rest did not have environmental cases. So maybe there's more outside Metro Manila. Okay, so finally, suggestions. There's always a supervising lawyer because it's the lawyer who signs the pleadings, the petitions, the complaints. And that lawyer should be a practicing lawyer kasi dapat MCLE siya. Hindi siya pwedeng pumirma if she's not MCLE compliant. Preferably with environmental science awareness or environmental planning, lalo na kung urban yung setting. Office space. Well, this is UP again. I'm showing UP. This is our learning commons at BGC. So, kaya naming mag-social distancing. And then, you can see also the facilities. Very lenient ang UP eh. Itong nakikita nyo, we have computers right there. I also use my laptop. My student, my law intern is right there beside me. That's our staff. Pwedeng buhatin yung mga copier from one office to the other. Hindi ganun ka-strict ang UP. So, nililipat-lipat namin. So, funds, remember we need supplies, a lot of paper. So, document copies, filing fees, pwede naman 6 months lang to reimburse. Transportation and meals for appearances, for the students especially, meron ding van, meron court, and then the cost for RT-PCR antigen tests after the pandemic. So there you go, and there we are. This is the UP College of Law in BGC. It's called Henry C. Senior Hall, and there are my law interns. You can see them properly dressed, and our clients as we have our final group photograph in there. So thank you very much. I hope that helped.
Thank you very much, Attorney Donna, for sharing your experience and the challenges in handling environmental cases through the UP and the La Salle Environmental Law Clinic. Surely your advocacy to help the marginalized is admirable and truly serve the purpose of a law clinic. So with that, we will now have our 5-minute break, and we encourage everyone to be back at 10:19. So you may now take your 5-minute break and see you at 10:19. All right, so I guess everyone is back in their room. So we will now proceed to the third lecturer for today's session. So let me introduce to you our third invited resource speaker. She is a lawyer of Client Earth Asia Climate and Energy Program. She works with the civil society regulators and the private sector to facilitate the transition to climate neutral economies in Asia. She also leads efforts to enhance capacity for energy, climate, and environmental law practice in the region. Our third resource speaker also worked on climate change, energy, and natural resources regulation, disaster governance, environmental law education, and South-South collaboration in the Philippines and Cambodia. She participated in the UN Climate Conference as part of the Philippines delegation in civil society and as a writer for the Earth Negotiations Bulletin, which provides independent reporting services for international treaty negotiations on environment and development. In the Philippines, our third resource speaker, is an associate of CICIP Law, a consultant for the ATB, and a lecturer in Ateneo Law School, where she obtained her JD with honors. She later obtained an MSc in Environment and Development with distinction from the University of Edinburgh, UK, where she was a Chevening Scholar. Our third resource speaker is qualified to practice law in the Philippines and the state of New York. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Attorney Joyce Merkel-Tan from Client Earth. Good morning, Attorney Joyce.
Good morning, everyone. And I am trying to share my screen. I just want to make sure that everything is looking fine.
Yes.
Can you see it? Great. All right. Thank you. And thank you so much, Maria. And good morning, everyone. So I am really excited to be here with you this morning, and particularly following the talks of Georgie and Attorney Donna Gasconia, because we are currently in the process of launching a different approach to legal clinics, which is where we set up a network of different legal clinics across law schools in different regions of the country, so that they can work together as they try to establish environmental practice within their clinics. And so before I begin, I just wanted to say that I'm splitting my time with John Mengito, who is the managing trustee for EJC, and I will explain that in a little bit during my presentation. So I will focus on the setting up of this new structure, and John will then talk about the experiences in networking with the different legal clinics and the work that they have done so far. So just to set that up. And also, I wanted to begin by saying that when I was a law student a few years ago, I did take a clinical legal education class. And most of the cases that we had dealt with things where a person would come to us for help because he was unfairly dismissed from work, or a mother would come because her son was arbitrarily detained and in prison for months without charges having been filed, because the wheels of justice were just grinding too slow, but they could not afford a lawyer to help them with their case. And I think that that is a reflection of the kinds of cases that are very common in a lot of the legal aid clinics that we have in the Philippines. So as Georgie mentioned earlier, but it's really great to know that the clinics at UP Law and OLA are already taking so many environmental law cases. And these are the kinds of cases that we would like to see growing and growing within the coming years. And so fast forward years later, I was then working with an NGO, and we had the opportunity to collaborate with law clinics in the US. And I learned a lot from that because some of their students were starting to work with NGOs in different countries to try to scope and develop legal strategies for cases, for example, in the Colombian Amazon, to determine how to best protect the forests from further degradation, and the indigenous communities that were living there and that depended on the forests for their livelihood, and also to protect these forests from further degradation so that they could play their role as carbon sinks in a bid to abate and address climate concerns. And then there were also some clinics, for example, at the University of Virginia, where the students did some legal research and technical research and drafting to look at how air pollution was differentially influencing and affecting marginalized communities, because they lived in places where they were very near factories that were polluting the air that they were breathing, and which was of a very different air quality as the areas where the affluent members of the community lived. So that kind of model where there was cross-country and cross-clinic collaboration really struck a chord with me, and I thought that it was very inspiring. And so now I have the privilege of being able to work to make something like that happen in the Philippines. And so I'm hoping that we see that kind of collaboration happening within the next few years. And so just to briefly talk about introduce my organization first. So I work with an organization called Client Earth, and we are one of the largest environmental law NGOs in Europe. And we also now are growing and with a presence in parts of Asia. And we do most of our work fighting climate change, and we also do access to environmental justice by empowering people and promoting the rule of law. So as it will be common to a lot of you here. We are using the law as a tool to bring about end-to-end systemic change so that we can help shape it so that it allows a better protection of the environment, and then we help implement and enforce it. And then when laws are broken, we try to make sure that there are mechanisms so that people can go to a court or a quasi-judicial agency to have these violations redressed. And so I just wanted to talk about some of the challenges and then the opportunities that we have seen in the process of developing this peer learning and network model of clinical collaborations with partners in Asia. And so to start, there are some of the issues here that have been discussed by Georgie and Donna earlier, so I will just briefly run through them. But then one of the major challenges that we normally deal with in our work at Client Earth is that the environmental issues relating to climate and biodiversity and other nature crises are very complex, so that they require a lot of scientific and technical expertise, so that it's really difficult to pursue these cases without having a good understanding of the science. And then once you take that extra time to be able to understand the science, in some cases, the science will have evolved already. And so you'd have to keep learning. And in the meantime, the technology that allows for polluting activities will have evolved even faster. And so there's always this catch-up game. The other part of it is that for many of us who are already currently lawyers, we did not formally study environmental law as a required subject when we were law students. So there's a bit of an unfamiliarity with it within the core curriculum. And then even within the judicial system, right now we see that in the recent years there has been a lot of focus on environmental judicial training, but in the past there really was a dearth of understanding of environment and climate change issues compared to all the other areas of law. So that's one of the first challenges that I wanted to highlight. The other one is at an institutional level for clinics, and this was mentioned already previously, which is a lack of resources. And I put in two particular categories. One is funding and the other is staff. And this is really to set up the clinic, to allow it to operate and have enough money to be able to pay the staff and the interns, including for things like the transport allowance and meals that Donna was mentioning earlier, and the cost of photocopying and producing documents and things like that. And then also there's a lack of staff. And we've seen this because in some of the clinics that we have started speaking with, some of them will just have one or a few, just a handful of supervising lawyers that are available to supervise students, even if there may be an interest among law students to learn about environmental law and handle these kinds of cases. And then at an individual level, I put here that it's a catch-22 because it sort of goes around and around, the problem does. So first, there is this question of financial security, because the lawyers who are qualified hesitate to go into environmental law because of the perception that you can't make that much money to support your family and you have to be practical. So then you pursue other areas of law rather than environmental law. The other one is personal security. So again, this was mentioned earlier, considering that the Philippines is one of the most dangerous countries for environmental and human rights defenders. And so that puts a lot of people off from specializing in environmental law. And the combination of this and the lack of supervising lawyers have this effect of a then general lack of interest in specializing in environmental law among the law students compared with other areas of law. And then finally, there's the challenge of COVID-19 hampering in-person collaboration. So that sort of set the timeline a little bit backwards when you're trying to set up these things. And these challenges are by no means exhaustive. And Donna has mentioned a lot more specific challenges in the actual running of environmental law clinics, but these are just a few that I wanted to highlight. And I wanted to highlight them specifically because we're trying to find ways where we change these challenges into opportunities. So for example, in the area of environmental and climate issues being very complex. So now there is a very big international and interdisciplinary community that offers a lot of help and a lot of networking and technical assistance for lawyers and law clinics. And then secondly, the Philippines already has a lot of laws. So we are not working from nothing. There are a lot of laws that we can use in terms of securing better environmental protection. And then at the institutional level, in terms of resources, so one of the very positive development is the lab requirement, which although it may not be a complete solution to allow the law clinics to access funding from the university, it will give a bit of a buffer so that the clinics can access some resources from the universities and even maybe the core and institutional funders from the universities who can then channel some of their funds or earmark some of their funds towards the operation of the clinics themselves. Also, there are a lot of volunteer lawyers, students, and networks from not just from the Philippines, but internationally. And I will mention some of them later in case they might be of interest to some of you here. And then at the individual level, there's also already a growing global community of practice. So what I mentioned earlier about a law clinic from a US law school partnering with a foreign NGO so that they can, in Colombia, so that they can pursue environmental cases in Colombia, things like that, that are at no cost to the clinic, but then allow them to get both assistance on a technical and scientific level and also assistance from a foreign legal level, which will allow them to brainstorm and test their legal strategy. And then there's also law firms that have pro bono and low bono assistance for NGOs, and then NGOs themselves whose core mission it is already to enforce environmental protection. So if law clinics partner with NGOs, then there's that access to the environmental problems that are available in the community that could be the subject of cases. And there's also that access to the communities themselves and the knowledge about the environmental issues that could provide the evidence for these legal claims and on which cases can then be built. Second, there are also fellowships. So Rose Lisa asked earlier about potential support for environmental defenders, and the Bertha Foundation has, I think it's about 2-year fellowships, which part of which is to support environmental defenders in the work that they do. And in the Philippines, I believe they're partnering with Center Law, so that Center Law can provide assistance whenever there are environmental and human rights defenders who have been threatened or harassed, so that they can provide free legal advice and legal assistance. There are also other organizations internationally that do provide some small grants and funding that could supplement the resources of a legal clinic. So some of them will be very much based on the topic. So there's the Climate Justice Climate Justice Fund, which specializes on climate change issues. And there's the Foundation for International Law for the Environment, which has a much broader scope. And then hopefully soon, our organizations will be doing something similar as well. And then also on the topic of an environmental defenders initiative. So this is something that is a very complex issue, right? Because it affects the personal security and the family security of an individual and can affect them beyond their work to really affect their family life and even mental and psychological well-being. So the good thing is, in addition to frontline defenders and global witness, there are also certain international organizations that do provide training and assistance. So one of them is INCLO, the International Network of Civil Liberties Organization, which provides training in order to ramp up communications and technical and technological security within NGOs and organizations like legal clinics. So these could perhaps plug some of the gaps and address some of the challenges that we have identified before. The other is that millennials have been growing a lot of interest in climate and nature, which means that on an international level, there is a lot of interest in the topic itself, so that even if litigation itself might not be successful, it could still lead to changes in law and in regulations, so that overall the environmental protection in a community is strengthened. And then in terms of COVID-19, although it has hampered in-person collaboration, it has opened international opportunities for virtual collaboration, including things like this. So I see that my time is running out, so I'm just gonna give a small, just run through this list of available resources. So of course, the partners here, they do have those resources. And then in addition, Environmental Law Alliance Worldwide, ELAW, has a lot of resources on environmental law. PILNet and ELF, they do a matching service where they match lawyers who want to give their time pro bono with NGOs that have a need for legal assistance. And then I'm just going to go very quickly through this just to point out that action does not require litigation. And so just because you have a law clinic does not mean that your only work is to pursue cases. You can also help shape laws, raise the profile of environmental issues. So one of the things that we're doing is for the national elections to do an environmental wish list of candidates. At the local level, present submissions and briefs for ordinance reform and implementation of laws, and then increase access to environmental justice, for example, by bringing the law to the people and having them understand what their environmental rights are, so that they can help bring these issues to the courts and quasi-judicial agencies so that they can be addressed. And then I just wanted to end with something that I thought was related nicely to what Regina said, that all lawyers should be environmental lawyers. And at Kind Earth, we do believe that all lawyers can be environmental lawyers. And later on, I can tell you a little bit more about how we're using other areas of law in order to do that. So for our clinics, we're using a peer learning model, which is a network of 5 law schools, and we connect them with NGOs and lawyers, and then both at the international and national level. And we are working with them on processes to select their cases and then identify the resources that are available and that are needed, and with the overarching principle that any work that they do should not harm communities or the legal team or the university with which they're connected. So this is a map showing the legal clinics that we have in our partnership. So I will stop here, but I'd be happy to answer questions later, and I will then hand over to Maria for John's section.
Thank you, Attorney Joyce, for that lecture. Now, to continue, as part of the lecture, we have with us today our fourth research speaker, also from Client Earth, Attorney John Minguito. Attorney John is a graduate of the University of Cebu School of Law, where he was a student leader with a strong interest and passion for environmental protection. At present, he is connected as a professor of law at UC Law, where he teaches clinical legal education to junior and senior law students. He is also the director of the UC Law Legal Aid Office and a supervising lawyer for its clinical legal education program. Currently, he is the managing trustee of the Philippine Earth Justice Center Incorporated, where he leads a team of lawyers with the objective of ensuring the full implementation of environmental law in the country. Their work varies from advocacy, litigation, and policy recommendation to uphold the right to a healthy environment as a constitutional right. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Attorney John Minguito. Good morning to you, Attorney John.
Good morning. Thank you very much for that warm introduction, Romina. And just to correct, I'm not from Client Earth, but we're partner with Client Earth. I am from the Philippine Earth Justice Center. Thank you very much to Joyce and to the Legal Education Board for giving us the opportunity to share what we do at the Philippine Earth Justice Center. So let me just share my screen. Um, let me know if for a while. Okay. And I'm just going to have this one in full screen mode so that everybody can see it. Okay. Oh. Okay. For a while. Okay, there you go. Are you able to see the screen at this point?
Yes, attorney.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to talk about mainstreaming environmental justice through
John, it's
green
still-
legal.
Sorry, John, Matthew here. It's still not in full screen. I can.
Oh, okay. For a while, let me just fix it. Okay. Oh, okay. I have a technical issue. Every time I put it in full screen, it says your sharing is paused for some reason.
Okay, so we can still see the share. It's just that there we can still see the information under export PDF and.
Oh, okay. But in my screen, it's already actually full screen. Anyway, can I proceed with this or?
Yes.
Yes, attorney, you may proceed.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to talk about mainstreaming environmental justice through green legal clinics in the Philippines. And I'm John Miguito from the Philippine Earth Justice Center. I'd like to thank again everyone for giving this opportunity to share what we do at the Philippine Earth Justice Center. Yeah, just now. Okay, so what is a green legal clinic? And the green legal clinic that we do is that our vision is as follows. For environmental lawyers, law students, practitioners, and public interest groups working together in promoting environmental advocacy, providing timely assistance to environmental disputes, and capacitating local communities. Earlier, prior to my discussion, Joyce was showing a map of the green legal clinics that we have in the country right now. And our goals are as follows. Is basically three major goals is to strengthen environmental law education and to encourage more lawyers to specialize in environmental litigation and advocacy, and also to capacitate lawyers and law students in environmental law. And these are our partner schools at the Philippine Earth Justice Center, also in partnership with Client Earth. And some of them are present here this morning. We are located in the Visayas and Mindanao, and our partners are the Andres Bonifacio College. We have the Holy Name University, we have the University of Cebu, and the University of San Agustin in Iloilo, and the College of Maasin, College of Law. And they are located in the Visayas and Mindanao. So what do we do at the Green Legal Clinic? So our recent activities, we did our launching with the MOA signing with the different law schools in the country. And the first that we did is capacity building sessions, wherein the focus is for the foundations of starting and maintaining an environmental legal clinic. So we invited experts from within the Philippines and outside of the country to talk about certain topics for a start in building their environmental law clinic. So some of the topics actually include the overview of the capacity building training sessions for the environmental law clinics, understanding the foundations and different models of environmental law clinics, running a green law clinic and advocacy center, the situationer, the state of the Philippine environment. We were also talking about the procedural rights in making environmental law work. We have divided the topics also into understanding the blue laws, the green laws, and the brown laws in the country, in the Philippines. So these are our capacity building sessions and the modules. Joyce was talking earlier is that about the silver lining of the pandemic is that we are also able to gather international networks and local networks and able to do it virtually, just like what we're doing this morning. And we were also talking about the skills necessary for coming up with a campaign and advocacy, the important life skills in running a local law clinic. So our partner law schools were also taught about the protecting the rights of indigenous cultural communities and indigenous peoples and the basics of institution registration. So because what we did is that each law clinic is going to assess the environmental issues in their certain areas. For example, in Bohol, they have different issues than what we have in Cebu, than what we have in Iloilo, and also what we have in Mindanao, in northern Zamboanga area, Zamboanga del Norte, and also in the area of Samar and Leyte, because this is where our law clinics, partner law schools are located. So this is in order to address different environmental issues in the different areas in the country. So in addition to that, we are going to share with you our timeline of activities for this year. So we started July of this year, and we are done with our capacity building trainings of the different law schools. Now we move forward to the actual activities of the different law schools, because after the training, they are now going to conduct capacity building trainings in their communities. So different topics in the different areas. And they're also going to do, after the capacity building, alongside the capacity building, they were also going to start building cases if necessary. And we are going to partner also with local governments and in the certain areas, and let's see where we can help them. So we see that this is unique in the different areas. In Cebu, for example, the University of Cebu is going to partner with the police, Philippine National Police Cebu Province, wherein the project is going to discuss we're going to make sure that all police stations in the province of Cebu will be discussed with the rules of procedure in environmental cases and the SLAP suit, for example. In College of Maasin, for example, we're going to go to a community of fisher folks, and they're going to talk about the rights of the fisher folks and also the rules of procedure in environmental cases. So what we're trying to say is that in different law schools, they have different issues of environmental issues that they are going to tackle. So with that, like I mentioned, the different law schools actually have different timelines, and they have the different issues that they are going to share in each one of that they are going to address as well. So I'd like to end my presentation by with this one, and I'd like to, because some of our law partners are here as well present, that because there are different complex issues of environmental laws in the country. Even if we are especially in the Visayas, so we are located in different areas, there are different issues in the different areas. So I'd like to thank Client Earth for this opportunity to help our law schools build their own green legal clinics. And with that, we end our presentation. Thank you very much and good morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Attorney John. So we will now move on to the open forum. I'll give the floor to Matthew, who will be a facilitator. Matthew.
Thank you very much indeed, Mary. And thanks, John and Joyce, if you're still with us. That would be great. to start off the program. So I was wondering if there are any questions from any of our attendees. Please either raise your hand or put the questions in the chat box. One question I actually had, John, is in relation to the memorandum of understanding. And was that something that was negotiated, or was with each individual one, or did we have? And maybe Donna, Attorney Donna, can sorry, thank you very much. Sorry, I didn't see you there, Attorney Donna. Was that with each of the specific law schools, or were they things that they were also, had ideas about and negotiated with you?
Yes, thanks for the question, Matthew. Yes, we what we did is that we identified certain law schools we want to partner with, and then we sent out letters to them, and then continued with a series of meetings and how it's going to be, what's the partnership would look like, and what are the responsibilities of each partner law schools, and what are our responsibilities at the Philippine Earth Justice Center. And perhaps also Joyce can add to that, to answer to that question, if Joyce has something to say as well with regard to partnering with the different law schools and the MOA signing.
Yeah, sure. So a lot of that was really led by PJC. And I guess just to explain a little bit about the model, that the coordinating organization for the 5 law schools is an environmental NGO. So that's where John sits as the PJC managing trustee. But then PJC and the University of Cebu Law School entered into separate MOUs with the different law schools. And what Client Earth did was just to support this process to enable the networked approach for this. And the idea really is so that as the schools build up their environmental law practice, that they can learn from one another, because their on-the-ground experiences will be relevant and helpful to one another. And then at the same time, we can play a role in connecting them with international NGOs and international law schools who might also want to collaborate with them.
And so part of that sort of MOU is also that the each of these new law schools setting up their clinics will collaborate with each other. So it's a sort of a collaborative process.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
And I wonder, I mean, Attorney Donna, in terms of the clinic, clinical legal education, which has obviously been around for some years, do the students, is that something that, students are really keen to apply for, or does it depend on, which students are really interested in maybe environmental law? I mean, is there any way of gauging that level of interest on a year-by-year basis?
Well, the environmental litigation clinic is just part of the UP Clinical Legal Education Program, which is a requirement because of Rule 138A. They can't take the bar unless they get certified to have completed the Clinical Legal Education Program. But UP offers several. So environmental litigation is one of them. We have political and human rights. We have competition law. We have OSG externship. So they can then choose, and then the bigger one is the Office of Legal Aid, which basically handles labor and urban poor problems. So I do get, actually I limit the slots for my clinic to just 10 students per term. I can't handle more. But for La Salle pa, College of Law, it's not a clinic, it's more practice court 1, which is still based on Rule 138A. Also a requirement to take the bar. So they have to be certified to have completed that. So it's a requirement, but it depends on the professor. Since I'm more into environment, practice court 1 and 2 under me is environmental law. But if the professor has a different perspective, then they will get a different perspective, but it's required.
Right. And so, John, I was just wondering, in terms of the numbers of students that this program is designed to cater for? How many students is the sort of the minimum and maximum that you're focusing on?
Okay.
Right now, sorry, John. Sorry, I thought I was still being asked.
Oh,
Go
sorry,
ahead.
Attorney Donna, you said you limited to 10 students.
Yes.
Thank you, Matthew. In our case, we connected it with the requirement of the Supreme Court of the Clinical Legal Education Program, because this project also helps the law schools comply with the requirements of the Supreme Court. As mentioned by Attorney Donna, the students are now required to have the clinical legal education program before they are able to take the bar exam starting 2023. Understand? So in this case, there's it really is up to the law school as to the control of the number of law students that they are going to enroll in the certain program. But usually in our experience, all the law student practitioners are actually have a rotation with the green legal clinics. So it depends on the number of law students that they have in their law school who are law student practitioners.
Mm. And Joyce, I mean, is the aim, I guess, something that if it works because I think this is a very new program in terms of setting up clinics, but also setting up a collaborative process. Would this be something that could be replicated subject to funding and obviously commitment by the law schools?
Yeah, definitely. And the collaboration that we have right now is a pilot in the Philippines, and the overall vision is to have this done in other countries as well. So yes.
Okay, so are there any other questions if anyone would like to raise their hand or ask a question in terms of to any of our speakers? I mean, I'm very interested in this idea of clinical legal education because it does vary both in terms of what can be offered. And I was in Wuhan at the Research Institute for Environmental Law, which is one of China's preeminent law schools. And when the launch was happening for the establishment of the Environmental Law Clinic, and there was a lot of discussion about student participating in court. And I remember when I was at law school, which was 1989, I think it was 1988. That's right. I was in fourth year law, my second last year. And I did ask the then Chief Judge of the Land and Environment Court, Justice Cripps, if when I was in final year law school, could I appear in his court? I think he fell off the stage. He was so shocked that a law student would appear. So in Australia, we still don't have law students that would appear in court, even with sort of attorney practitioners, which is a very standard thing in America. So I'm really interested in the changing ideas and what it can mean for students. But is there also the challenge of students who only have one semester at the clinic, or is it just one semester? Or is it 2 semester courses? I'm not quite sure. So two semesters. So and Attorney Donna, do you find that that's a good time that the students can then really learn about the practicalities of law?
Yes. In fact, our law interns can appear in court provided your law school is accredited by the judge, the city judge. If your law school is accredited, your law intern can actually appear in court and actually directly examine a witness because we prosecute. I mean, if the lawyer is for defense, then also cross. But yes, they appear. And whenever we sign pleadings, we let our law interns sign below the signature of the supervising lawyer. So they are also basically acknowledged.
Yeah. In addition to that, Matthew, what Attorney Donna was sharing, us at the Philippine Agency Center, we also help our green legal clinics have all their students accredited, so to speak, in their certain regional trial courts in their certain areas. For the University of Cebu, We already have all our level 1 and level 2 certified law student practitioners, and we are helping other law schools as well in order for them to be able to represent it before the courts or before negotiations as well. Thank you.
And can I then ask, I mean, in terms of practicalities, does it also then mean that the judges that you're appearing before have some experience about student practitioners appearing before them? Because I think that's also interesting to ensure that the judges have that experience.
Let me answer that quickly. In our case, our executive judge of the RTC of Cebu City is very engaged with the law students. As a matter of fact, in the law student practice rule as well. So Executive Judge Maniva is very much engaged. As a matter of fact, they offered externship program at the RTC as well. So all the judges within the jurisdiction of the Cebu City RTC are well versed in terms of the law student practice rule.
So that's great. Look, can I? Yes, Attorney Donna, please.
Can I? Because there are environmental courts, the judges are very familiar with the Rule 138. They even call them law interns already. So yes, they know that. So
that obviously is a great benefit for both the students as well as the clinic, that the judges are supportive and aware of how and what the students are doing. So that's obviously a good thing.
And if I could just add, sorry, they are very supportive as well, so that when they find that the law students are faltering, they do sort of lead them to where they should be going. So it's a very good learning experience overall.
And yes. Lastly, Matthew, I just want to add with what Joy is saying. In Iloilo, the University of San Agustin, we're very excited because the law school or Green Legal Clinic is being proactive, and they call other law schools to have all the students credited as a law student practitioner. So we create our own Zoom discussion on the compliance with the law student practice rule, and in collaboration also with the courts in Iloilo. So we'll be doing that by December 3rd of next week.
So thank you all. I noticed the time. Thank you very much, Attorney Donna, Attorney John, and Attorney Joyce. It's great to see you, Joyce especially. I know you are up very early at the moment talking to us from London. So we really, really appreciate your commitment there. And especially after a busy month with COP26. Attorney Donna, thank you very much. And Attorney John, thank you very, very much for your participation. Mary, I will turn back to you for the certificates. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you very much to our resource speaker. Now we will move to the awarding of the certificates. So the Legal Education Board award the Certificate of Appreciation to Attorney Donna Z. Gasconia, Law Professor of the University of the Philippines College of Law, Clinical Legal Education Program, Environmental Litigation, and La Salle de Pa College of Law Practice Court 1 and 2 for sharing her time, knowledge, and expertise during the Environmental Law Teachers Online Training Program 9th session, How to Design an Environmental Law Clinic, Experiences and Challenges, held via Zoom virtual conference and given on the 24th day of November in the year of our Lord 2021 in Manila, and signed by our chairperson, Ana Marie Melanie B. Trinidad. The same citation is also awarded to Attorney Joyce Mercartan, lawyer for Client Earth Asia Climate and Energy Initiative, for sharing also her time, knowledge, and expertise as resource speaker for today's session. So the certificate is also given on the 24th day of November and signed by the Legal Education Board Chairperson, Ana Marie Melody P. Trinidad. For a third resource speaker, we also award the Certificate of Appreciation to Attorney John Gito, lawyer for, I apologize for the mistake in the citation, we'll correct that, for Philippine Earth. Am I correct, Attorney John? Okay.
Yes.
And then for sharing also his time, knowledge, and expertise as resource speaker during the Environmental Law Online Teachers Training Program 9th session, held via Zoom virtual conference and given the 24th day of November, signed by our chairperson, Ana Marie Melanie B. Trinidad. Thank you very much to our resource speaker for joining us in today's session and to our participants for your continued support in the training program of the Legal Education Board. So before we end today's session, we would like to remind our participants of the their attendance sheet, also with the evaluation sheet for further compliance to the attendance requirements. Okay, may we also request and take this opportunity for us to have a group picture. So to our participants, can we request everyone to turn on their video camera and wear their best smile for a quick picture. Our ADB colleague will be taking our picture. So everyone,
Right, everybody, on three, one, two, and three. One, four more, three more frames, one, two, and three. Last two, one, two, and three. Final shot, one, two, and three. All right, thank you, everybody.
thank you, Angelo. To our participants, as a last reminder, you may please check your inbox and spam messages for the mailer that we will be sending for our next session in December 1. As we near the end of our training program, we would like to congratulate and remind everyone that we will now be only requiring at least 8 sessions for the issuance of the training certificate. We hope everyone gained valuable insight and knowledge for today's session. And thank you very much for your overwhelming support. Again, see you on December 1. Thank you.